Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm joined today by Max Blumenthal, journalist, author, filmmaker, and also the editor-in-chief of The Gray Zone. It's good to see you again, Max.
Great to see you.
So we often see that the calls for censorship, they appear to come under the guise of empathy, and in the United States, and indeed Europe as well, the political right has been very critical of how the LGBT gender ideology, especially on college campuses, has been used for censorship and cancellation. However, now we see it's the political right which is calling for censorship and cancellation on campuses with the argument that criticizing Israel's war against the Palestinians makes people anti-Semitic or supporting of terrorism. Um, how serious do you see this development at the universities, and I guess what precedents are being set here?
Well, I've said ever since I became outspoken on this issue that the Israel lobby in the United States and around the West was the greatest free speech, greatest threat to free speech in putatively liberal democratic societies. And now all of my warnings are being realized and coming to fruition under the Trump administration, which made various promises to Zionist organizations and Zionist supporters that it would do exactly what it's doing now. And in fact, in 2024, under the auspices of the Heritage Foundation, which for decades has functioned as sort of the outsourced brain of the Republican Party on Capitol Hill, situated just blocks from the US Capitol on C Street, there was this Project 2025, which became kind of a boogeyman of liberal Democrats in the United States because it spelled out the most maximalist agenda that Donald Trump could fulfill domestically, which is playing out before our eyes in many ways and mainly focuses on attacking the administrative state, attacking the administrative bureaucracy that is supposedly the base of the liberal project. But separate from Project 2025 at the Heritage Foundation was Project Esther. And this was the product of a group of pro Israel organizations, not just Jewish ones, a Christian right organization called the Family Research Council, which is mainly known for opposing abortion and the LGBT agenda, played an important role in this document. And this document lays out the blueprint that the Trump administration is following for suppressing and destroying the Palestine solidarity movement in the United States. And it focuses heavily on campus organizations, but also just on civil society groups that are NGOs, and calls for with, withdrawing student visas for people who participate in Palestine activism, as well as going after green card holders and withdrawing the nonprofit status of various Palestine solidarity organizations. It does this by labeling all of them as HSNs, which means Hamas Support Network. They are members of a Hamas support network, and therefore there is a pretext, according to this Project Esther blueprint, for labeling them all as material supporters of terrorism because they are supposedly not just pro Hamas, but they are actually an arm of Hamas. And we can go into the details of how this is playing out. But this was sort of the theory of change for the Zionist movement that had embedded itself within the Trump campaign and now the Trump administration, that they could actually link the whole civil society network of Palestine solidarity groups to Hamas and then label them terrorist organizations and then take legal measures against them and criminalize and defund them. And that is now happening.
Well, it seems that this has always been a bit of a propagandistic tactic to play. That is, you create a simplistic binary divide, us or them. So, yeah, if you criticize Israel's slaughter in Gaza, then you're a Hamas supporter and supporting terrorism.
Right.
If well, and again, we see the same applied to Ukraine. If you criticize NATO provoking and prolonging the war in Ukraine, then you're legitimizing or supporting Russia's invasion. And it seems that whenever you criticize the war machine, you take the side of Milosevic, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi. This is
Yeah.
yeah, very standard recipe. It seems now to the same play every single time. But with Israel, though, it does appear to be much more powerful. That is, as you said, they're working it into law. So, uh, well, I guess where does this power come from, and also how extensive are these laws? Because is it only legal to boycott the occupied territories, or where exactly how far can this actually go?
Well, exactly. There's much more momentum to crush opponents of Israeli apartheid in the US than there is to crush prominent supporters of a negotiated peace with Russia and ending the Ukraine proxy war. I mean, we saw under the Biden administration this ferocious attack on all voices who opposed the Ukraine proxy war. We saw Scott Ritter targeted with a FARA investigation. The FBI seized his files from when he was a UN inspector. And there was another person in Washington, Dimitri, I'm forgetting his name. He was a Sputnik host, but he had done some consulting for the Trump campaign. His home was raided. He was pushed out of the country. This wasn't bipartisan, though. When the Trump administration came in, we saw a push for a different policy on Ukraine. There was actually a debate in Washington on the issue of Israel-Palestine and Zionism specifically. There's a bipartisan, elite enforced consensus that there can be no daylight between the US government and Israel. And that also means that civil society has to be brought to heel because civil society cannot be allowed to influence government policy on Israel. The policy is going to be set by AIPAC, the main arm of the Israel lobby, and that's it. So I'll give you an example of how this assault on free speech and the First Amendment and just academic freedom particularly has progressed in the United States. Under the Biden administration, there was actually discussion of pulling student visas, withdrawing student visas on a political basis for pro-Palestine activity, but it wasn't enforced. The Biden administration did deliver to the Israel lobby the actual sanctioning of a Palestine solidarity group called Samidun, which is also sanctioned in Germany. Its supporters had their apartments raided, their bank accounts were seized, and they declared that this was linked to a terrorist group. PFLP, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a Marxist Palestinian group that has very little role now in the armed struggle. And they do have a militia in Gaza, but they're definitely not involved in international acts of what's considered terrorism, as they were in the 70s when they participated in hijackings. It's a political organization that actually signed on to the Oslo Accords, and Samidun's links to it are, they're not concrete. Basically, what they do in the United States is they participate in protests and they organize awareness for Palestinian prisoners who are languishing in Israel's prisons. A scholar at Yale University who is a legal expert, who is considered kind of a rising star in academia, named Helia Dutagi, was recently fired by Yale without any due process because she was accused by an AI website, a pro-Israel AI website whose provenance is unknown, no one knows who's actually writing it, of being a member of Samidun. So with that accusation, she was just thrown out the door. Um, this was under the Trump administration. So this process started under the Biden administration, but they finished the job under the Trump administration and have left her unemployed. And this is happening to dozens and dozens of scholars, along with the targeting of visa holders, students who participated in Palestine solidarity protests. Rumeysa Ozturk was a student at, I believe, Amherst University who was arrested by masked federal agents in the street on her way to an Eid dinner at her aunt's house in the middle of Boston. It was filmed. What had she done? Sorry, she was at Tufts University. She co-authored, along with three other students, an editorial calling for Tufts University to follow its own rules because the student government had voted to divest from companies that were involved in the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. So that's all she did. She co-authored a single op-ed for her student paper, and now she is in a federal holding facility in Louisiana, thousands of miles from where she lived in Boston. Who's behind this? Well, the Israel lobby is behind it, specifically in the Trump administration, because there is more momentum in the Trump administration to actually take these actions that might have been a little more controversial under Biden. It's the Adelson family. Sheldon Adelson, the late casino baron, was one of the first mega billionaires to step up and donate exclusively to the Republican Party, to invest in the Republican Party, along with his Israeli wife, Miriam. Sheldon Adelson died during the Biden administration, and his wife, Miriam, who also owns an NBA franchise called the Dallas Mavericks and has all sorts of business interests, has taken over. And in 2015, the Adelsons founded something called the Maccabee Task Force, which is one of the main organizations seeking to crush free speech and academic freedom on campus in the name of Israel. Sheldon Adelson, as I revealed at the Gray Zone, functioned as a CIA asset. He helped the CIA surveil Julian Assange. It's a long story. But it's pretty obvious that his wife is an Israeli intelligence asset. And the Adelsons have been called in repeatedly during Benjamin Netanyahu's corruption trials to testify against Netanyahu because they were major donors to Netanyahu throughout his career. And they have owned the largest pro-Netanyahu paper in Israel, Israel Hayom. So you basically have, to put it in a nutshell, an Israeli billionaire who is committed exclusively to Israeli interests, could not care less about the welfare of the United States as citizens, and runs the main arm of the censorship industrial complex on college campuses, the Maccabee Task Force, and has such an intimate relationship with Donald Trump that at his inauguration, she was seated directly behind Trump with a better seat than all members of Congress and most members of his cabinet. She has contributed $300 million just to that campaign and something like $600 million overall to Donald Trump's political career, along with hundreds of millions to Republican candidates, figures like Tom Cotton, who is one of the top ultra-Zionist voices in the Senate. So that's where it comes from. It comes from money. Unlike where you are, you can contribute unlimited money to the US political system, and the money is coming substantially from pro-Israel billionaires, as well as billionaires who are funding the endowments of Ivy League schools like Harvard. We saw after Harvard Students for Justice in Palestine group came out and protested after October 7th, various billionaires, including Ofer Zim, who runs Israel's largest shipping company, who went to Harvard, Bill Ackman of Pershing Capital, and Larry Summers demanded that Harvard ban that student group. They called its president, Claudine Gay, before Congress to answer for the fact that there was pro-Palestine activity on her campus. She refused to ban the group, to criminalize it, so they ousted her. And now Harvard is being taken over under Zionist management because it lost so much of its endowment. So it's all about money. It's all about, as we say in the US, it's all about the Benjamins.
Well, we had similar developments in Europe. Indeed, Yaris Varoufakis the former finance minister of Greece, was denied entry into Germany, and he wasn't even allowed to speak digitally, apparently over Zoom at a conference.
Yeah.
Again, not really a terrorist sympathizer, instead, but again, a critic of the genocide occurring in Gaza. Just my last, I guess, brief question would be on, did you see any indications that what has been done to foreign nationals who have been associated with, well, I guess, anti-Israeli or at least criticizing Israel being expelled? Do you see any of these laws possibly being extended to apply also to Americans?
Yes. The withdrawals of visas and green cards are being overseen by the State Department. The State Department is headed by Marco Rubio, who ironically lied about his own family's immigration status, falsely claimed that they had entered the United States after they fled from the tyranny of Fidel Castro's communism in Cuba. Turns out they left under the US-backed tyrant Fulgencio Batista prior to that time. But he's looking for any infraction, inconsistency on anyone's visa who's affiliated with anything remotely pro-Palestine to kick them out of the country, jail them, criminalize them. And Rubio's State Department spokeswoman, Tammy Bruce, was recently asked, I think this was about 1 week ago, at a State Department briefing, if they would rule out moving from student visa holders and green card holders, meaning permanent residents, to naturalized US citizens as targets of this witch hunt, that they would actually withdraw the citizenship of naturalized citizens. And she refused to say, yes, we will rule that out. She refused to even answer the question. And the Trump administration subsequently has not provided any answer on that question. So it remains an open question. And I think we've seen a precedent in Europe, for example, the case of Shamima Begum, who was a 15-year-old girl, apparently mentally unstable, who was enraptured by the ideology of ISIS during the high period of ISIS's occupation of northeastern Syria, and was convinced actually by a Canadian intelligence agent to enter Syria, where she then became a part of ISIS. And while being held as a prisoner there, the United Kingdom revoked her citizenship. She is no longer a citizen. So the precedent was set within a ostensibly liberal democratic country for withdrawing citizenship. And I think, if it does take place in the US, there will be a test case, will probably be a Muslim American who is naturalized, and they will withdraw their citizenship, and we'll watch the media and the liberal intelligentsia and administrative class kind of roll over as they have done throughout this entire process. Where in the US right now, there were just major protests against Donald Trump in every city in the US. Over 1 million people participated. It was very large in Washington, D.C. And there was almost no messaging about this issue we're discussing right now, which I think really is the heart of the matter.
And I remember the same happened with censorship or deplatforming, as they called it, when they got first initially set a precedent with Alex Jones, someone everyone seemed to agree upon was way over the limit of what should be acceptable speech. And of course, after this setting the precedent, it's been applied to more and more. So, anyways, Max
Great
Blumenthal,
point.
thank you so much for your time.